Hey, be a squid and subscribe to my mediocrity.
Alright, how's it going everybody? Today we're going to be doing the actual review for Bless Unleashed, the new console MMO that was just dropped. I'm going to do my absolute best to keep my inner demons out of this video and just not shit talk it or anything like that. I'm going to try and be as professional as I can so that way you guys are getting straight facts. No jokes, no nothing, just information from my experiences, from Reddit posts, video clips that I have to insert for evidence and whatnot. Just so that way you know where I'm coming from. This video is just going to be straight up facts and what I have experienced myself. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. So I want to start off with some positives here, and I want to correct people about my opinions when it comes to the combat. It feels like most people think I hate the combat because I don't understand it, or that I don't like it because it's a different, pace of combat comparatively to other MMOs. And to correct your assumption, it is not even remotely close. I don't mind the slow combat whatsoever. My issue with it is the fact that it's clunky and it has some input delay, and sometimes it just downright won't even let me attack. But if we were to just talk about the combat itself without any minor glitches or bugs or anything like that, and it's actually working, there's nothing really wrong with it. It's simple, easy to follow. The combinations are on the screen so that way you don't get confused and finger tied as you're trying to mash through all the buttons trying to figure out what to do like in BDO. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. I main the ninja in BDO, and I can tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the way the combat is in Bless Unleashed. Sure, it's slow and it may not be my cup of tea, but there's nothing wrong with that. There's no bullshit like you have to animation cancel low sweep kick into ninja step, and then you have to get your iframes out there with, sidestep into Shura Katana and all this other horse shit. Like, there's a lot that goes into the combat of BDO, and most of it is muscle memory as well as memorizing what button does what. And with Bless Unleashed, I can deeply appreciate the fact that there's combinations on the screen that tell you what's going to do what. All you have to do is just kind of remember what the move does, so that way you can apply it to whatever situation. So like the Crusader, for example, he has this move where you can AoE slam the ground, so that's great for clearing mobs and multiple enemies, but he also has another move that's more single target, and it does this kind of stabbing motion, which is more for, one target at a time, or just if you're fighting a boss or something. So there's definitely a little bit of depth to it, and there is somewhat skill involved as well, but it's not to the point to where you're literally burning your mind trying to figure it out. Another thing that I really enjoy is being able to preview the classes before it just throws you into the open world with no idea as to what you're supposed to do. Whenever you create a character, whether it be a mage, priest, archer, crusader, berserker, whatever class you choose, you get to preview that character at level 40 with the cool gear and all your movesets and whatnot, so you get an idea as to what they play like, and that's really good. It just allows you to cut the bullshit from the start instead of just going into a class blindly hoping you're gonna like it, and then you find out by like level 25, oh, I really don't like this, and then you have to create a new character and then do it all over again for another possible, you may or may not like it, So I really enjoy the fact that they get you to preview the character before you commit fully to it, and that's, I think, one of the better aspects for casual free-to-play games, because people really just want to know if this is worth their time, and that's one way of getting that to be shown. Another thing that I really enjoy is the crafting system within Bless Unleashed. I thoroughly enjoy this because I can have basically one character max out the professions and then just give the gear to a next character over, so that way I don't have to worry about crafting on the next character at all. It just kind of cuts the bullshit out of the way, and I can focus more on that character's leveling. And since there's no gear score lock or item level or anything like that, like you don't have to be level 10 to wear this piece of gear or anything like that, you can just craft up the best gear possible and toss it on over to your other alt characters and be perfectly ready to go. This is by far the best sort of crafting system I could ever ask for in terms of just MMOs on console. BDOs is trash because it's all about enhancing, and you can break your gear and lose it, and just it's a fucking process that's pay to win in my personal opinion. But Bless Unleashed, it just cuts the bullshit. You farm the materials, you craft up whatever gear you want, and if you want to use it, you can use it, and if you just want to craft it and toss it away and salvage it, you can do that. Just to get to forging level 5, that took me roughly about maybe an hour or two, and the only reason it took me that long is because this is where the love-hate relationship comes in, is because players are all fighting for the same nodes. I feel like for the amount of players that are going to be surging for the next couple days, nodes like iron or herbs, leather scraps and stuff like that, I feel like that should be upped immensely just to balance out the amount of players that are all farming for this, since crafting is such a huge part of the game, because gear is a huge part of the game. So you really need to up the amount that is available. All right, with all that being said, let's move on to the negatives now. And like I said, I'm going to do my best to be as fair as possible, no jokes, so let's go ahead and get into it. So let's talk about the negative side about the combat. So unfortunately, the combat, though it's slow and kind of like clunky and whatnot, that's fine. The clunkiness needs to just be tuned up a little bit. That's kind of the most I have to say. The input delay and whatnot, I don't know whether to classify that as an internet connection. It could have been on my behalf or maybe server problems. I'm not entirely sure. There is a huge surge of players that are playing right now, so maybe the servers are getting stressed perhaps. I'm just not entirely sure. I don't really want to put too much blame on the game for right now, other than the fact that there could just be, you know, some home problems on my end, whether it be internet or in-game problems. I don't really know. So I'll put the input delay and play devil's advocate and say that it might just be for right now it's that bad. But as far as the clunkiness, it definitely could be tuned up to be a bit smoother. And it also wouldn't hurt to add some in-depth mechanics to the characters. It doesn't have to be to the crazy level of BDO, but some animation canceling would be nice, so that way you can get some pretty good dodges off in terms of some of the other classes. Like the mage really has a hard time with dodging because they're stuck in casting animations for a super long time, and when they're questing alone or whatever, if they don't have anybody to tank the aggro, they're just going to take unnecessarily hits, and they're naturally not tanky. So there has to be some kind of counterbalance here in order to prevent them from being hit so often, whether that be more mobility options and whatnot. And I'm aware that they have a teleport. That's not the issue. The issue is whenever you're doing like a cast or whatever for one of your abilities that's not the teleport, you are deadlocked in an animation that cannot be moved. And if the mob hits you, sometimes it's hit stun, sometimes you get knocked down. There's a few variety situations that happen that just ruin the overall gameplay of the mage. And I've watched quite a few different videos. I'm not the only person that feels this way. Cry and the Lazy Peon have both said the same thing in terms of the game being very clunky and that the mage is possibly one of the worst classes in the game. Another thing I'd like to mention is that the game isn't necessarily very well optimized for Xbox One, but I will say to that negative side of things, it is not the most poorly optimized game on the Xbox One. That award goes to BDO, but it's just bad enough for me to have to mention it, so that way you guys are at least aware that it's not the smoothest experience. There's a lot of problems where textures aren't loading in, sometimes mobs don't even load in, and even though they're not loaded in for you, you can still take damage because they're loaded in the game. So for whatever reason, sometimes you'll just be taking damage from invisible creatures that you have no clue what the hell is even happening. I'll go ahead and insert this clip right here so you know what I'm talking about. Oh, there he is. Oh, Jesus, what the fuck? What? How was I supposed to dodge that? I didn't even see him. How the hell? He just spawned in Oblivion and just straight up, like, killed me for no... Oh, I'm just dead. What? I don't actually know what happened. I legitimately have no clue what happened. Yeah, I mean, there was basically nothing I could even do, and I actually died during that fight, and I've watched that clip back probably 50 times, and I still, to this day, cannot understand what I died from. It is a complete question mark to me, so I don't know. There's definitely a level of polish that is lacking in terms of optimization. And I guess the last major issue I have is the progression via, you know, questing and levels and whatnot. Not necessarily gear progression, that you can get at any point in time and go as fast as you want. It just is how much you're gathering and whatever. But as far as quest progression, it definitely feels slow and unrewarding. To give some context to what I mean by slow and unrewarding, currently right now my gear score is like 589 or 600. It's close to 600, something like that. And I'm in this area where it's level 14 and 15s, right? And I'm only level 10. So I don't really understand. Like I feel like I'm getting nothing in return for my efforts in terms of questing. Even the dungeons, like the holy trials and whatnot, those really feel unrewarding because all my crafting gear is way better than any gear I get from questing or dungeons. So it begs the question as to what's the purpose of doing them other than for XP. And dungeons give you virtually no XP at all, so there's no incentive to even do the 2v, like the duo dungeons. There's just no incentive for it whatsoever. And as far as questing goes, I've been doing nothing but the main quest, and I got to level 10 and I'm in a level 14 area. If it wasn't for the fact that my gear score is well above the average area for where I'm at, I would not be able to do this area whatsoever. So I'm trying to figure out how a new player would get to this point without having to purchase gear, because all I did, I went on the marketplace and just bought the best gear that was available. I had the seeds for it, so that's what I did. But for a free-to-play player, how are they supposed to even remotely progress without doing the same thing? And like, they would be stonewalled at a gear lock, and they would have to, you know, sit and craft for a couple hours and try and get the best gear they could in order to even progress. And even when they did get the appropriate gear, it still wouldn't necessarily be as much of a breeze as it is for me, because I have, you know, a gear score of like 600, and a player, as far as I'm aware of, like at level 10, the crafting is roughly around, like, the gear score is like 240, 250, maybe even 300, something like that. So I don't know, it seems very weird, and the progression being heavily tied to gear, and as well as questing not giving as much XP, and dungeons virtually giving no XP or really any good gear whatsoever. I just don't really understand or see the appeal in it. Whenever you do quests or complete a dungeon in an MMORPG, there's supposed to be a risk and reward situation, and there's really nothing in that regards at all. You can do the dungeons, but at least for me, I one-shot just about every boss in the dungeon, and not to mention the gear is completely worthless to me and the XP is non-existent, and it's the exact same way for the quest. I basically one-shot everything, and I don't really have any big issues whatsoever. I'm just basically going through the motions for no reward at all. It just seems really odd. I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong or there's something I'm missing, but even if I am doing something wrong, that says a lot about the game's information and how it doesn't really guide the player to do what they're supposed to do, or how the structure is very loose and it's not keeping the player on the proper track. And if the key is to do every single quest in the game, that's a bit much, even for me. I have a lot of time in the world to be playing video games, but I gotta be honest, I would rather be doing a lot of other different things than completing quests in Bless Unleashed. So I don't know, I feel like they need to up the XP just a little bit for dungeons and questing. Alright, I think that covers just about everything like that I wanted to talk about majorly. There's a lot of minor gripes and minor positives and whatnot, but I decided to leave those out of the video just because I didn't want it to be too nitpicky or whatever, so I just focused on the major aspects that I had a huge issue with. But anyway, the main score for this game, I'm going to be rather generous and give it a 5 out of 10. I definitely believe it could be an 8 out of 10, but it only needs to just up its game just a little bit. It needs to step up and polish the combat, up the XP just a tad bit, so that way you feel at least somewhat of a reward and progression. If they fix those two main things, I feel like this game would be absolutely fantastic. But anyway, I think this video has gone on long enough, so let's go ahead and close the chapter on Bless Unleashed. I will be leaving it off here, and I will be moving on to other games. I may revisit at a later time, but as of right now, I currently don't find much value in Bless Unleashed. So I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.